What happens if Canada elects a minority government? I'm Marco Perri. Welcome to the Perri platform. The elections are almost here, and with that, there has been a lot of talk about the future of Canada, and, in particular, the high possibility of a minority government. This has brought to the forefront words like coalition and proper democracy, and even accusations of infringements upon that. I'm going to clear this all up on today's episode so you can better understand how things might play out in the coming days. The first thing that we should realize, though, is that winning the most seats in an election does not guarantee you to be the prime minister. This is only applicable, though, in the case of a minority government, which in this year's election seems to be quite likely. It's useful to think of the government as a game of seats. Not quite as cool as Game of Thrones, but seats really is the right word to use here. The House of Commons has 338 seats up for grabs, and that's the tool that we use to determine who becomes a member of our government. To win a majority in this year's election, you would need 170 seats. If a party ends up with that many seats or more, they will definitely form the next government. It won't be a question because they have the seats, or the votes if you rather, to beat anyone else even if they band together. If you have the majority, it matters not if the NDP and the Green Party and the Liberals all pool their seats together, it will still not topple you. The fun happens though when we face a minority government because they are not guaranteed to produce the next prime minister. Now, this may come as a shocking revelation to some people. Oh, you can win the election technically and still not be the prime minister? What does that mean for our democracy? Is that a bad thing? Well, in short, the answer really is no. It's part of our democracy, and it's a tool that's not always used, but it can happen. The one thing I can promise you, though, is that it is legit, and some media sources are spinning this as if it's corruption or a failure of democratic values, but it's really not, and I think you'll agree with me the deeper we go into the issue. So you can have a party that wins the most seats when compared to any other party, but they might still not have the majority. This typically happens when the votes are split and Canada is really not fully decided on one leader or one party. If you win the most seats, you will still need the confidence of the House, and that's really what it comes down to. If the parties are accepting of this arrangement, even in your minority government, then they can pass that motion. The fact of the matter is, though, if you don't have that majority, you are kind of at the whims of the other parties to band together and deem you to be an acceptable candidate. You can't just get in based on your party strength alone in that minority situation. Now let's talk about some real life situations. In the case of a conservative party winning a minority government, Trudeau is probably looking to enlist support from other parties to help him remain the prime minister. As the sitting PM, he'll actually get a crack at maintaining the confidence of the House first. Now, alone, the Liberals couldn't do that because they lack the seats, according to polls and any other hypotheticals you want to toss out there. Them winning a majority is quite unlikely at this point. One option for them is to form a coalition. The NDP has voiced interest in that idea. Essentially, the Liberals would pool their votes or their seats with the NDP, in this case, in the hopes of creating a majority with that. Their combined seats would likely outnumber the Conservatives alone. Well, why would a party consider joining a coalition? The answer is it can come with a variety of perks. The NDP might bargain to get some cabinet appointments, they could be promised votes on certain issues, or any number of any government options, to be honest. It would give them a hand in the power process. Even if they don't want to form a coalition, they can even just trade these votes or these seats for future concessions from the Liberal government. Now that's one possible outcome. The other is if the Liberals win a minority. They could potentially hang on to that, or the Conservatives can attempt a similar tactic, force a vote of confidence to fail, and form their own coalition. It's not really clear, though, who they could enlist for help. The Liberals, the NDP, and the Green Party all align to the left of the political spectrum. The Conservatives' most likely ally would be the People's Party, and they have very slim support. There is one wildcard, though, that could make things extraordinarily interesting. The Bloc Québécois. They would likely band together with any party who can promise them one thing. They only have one very transparent aim after all, and that is Quebec's interest. Historically, minority governments don't last very long due to these internal struggles, so it's very important, if you are in a similar situation, to build these connections and bonds to make sure you have the seats and the votes accordingly to make sure you stay in government. Despite all of those issues, things can still get done even within a minority government. The votes might be split, but it brings a more centrist type of policy to the table. Even when Stephen Harper, the prime minister before Trudeau, had a minority government, he was still able to get things done because he made his bills and his suggestions more in line with the other parties. He needed those votes, and he couldn't do it by playing hardball. It's either you do that, and you collaborate, or you implode, and we vote again in a couple of years. I must note, though, that it is not anti-democratic. This process falls perfectly in line with our Constitution. This goes back to being a game of seats. We can vote for the politicians to have those seats and those spots. That's what it comes down to. But the parties combining power is really akin to pooling our personal votes. If a minority government forms with, say, 30% of the popular vote, they don't have a morally superior claim to power versus a party with 28% of the popular vote, but they combine with a party that owns 5%. Combined, they would in fact represent more people. It would be very different though if, for example, the most seats held by a party was 30% and it was being challenged by someone with, say, 5%. It would be interesting to see how the public would react to that. The wider the gap between you and the opposition, the less likely you are to be able to pull off a successful coalition, especially when you consider that the people who would need to join you for the coalition would just say, we should be the leaders instead. You have such a low support, why don't you support us? Not the other way around. So that's essentially the gist of the scenario. If you look at the polling data, the Conservatives and the Liberals are extremely close, but they both are not getting enough support for a majority. Experts are predicting a minority government unless a monumental shift happens in the following days. It's likely that we witness something similar to the possibilities I outlined previously. Making friends is going to be key here, and you can see the strategies of the party shifting in accordance with this data. The Liberals and the NDP are publicly discussing the idea of a coalition. The funny thing is that Singh started by saying he would absolutely consider it, but he has backtracked since then and saying it's not really his main focus anymore. It's really smart though, if you think about it from Singh's perspective, because if he concedes that voting NDP is really going towards Trudeau and helping the Liberals, well, some people might just jump ship and vote directly for the Liberals in that case. Supposedly, people like the NDP and want to vote for them because they are different from the Liberals. They have their own policies, they have their own leader, and presumably the people would like to see him be in the position of the Prime Minister, not Trudeau again. Now, those same people, they might start thinking differently if you tell them right away that, yeah, voting for me is voting for Trudeau because I'm going to back him up. It might be crushing for some of them to know that their vote is being directed elsewhere this early in the game. It also signals that Jagmeet doesn't really think he's going to win, which based on the polling data is a fair assessment, but voters don't want to see that. He would like to hang on to that appeal and that hope for as long as possible. The timing was not right when he said that he would absolutely consider it, and he realized that. That's why he started to backtrack on it. But there's no doubt in my mind, after everything is said and done, that he will form the coalition if it needs to be done. Trudeau now would be open to the coalition regardless. It's favorable for him in every possible scenario. If he can win the minority government, well, good. Now he has a good shot at staying in power. Or if he loses to the Conservatives, who then form the government, he has a chance to win with that coalition. The one downside is having to make concessions to the NDP and maybe offer them some cabinet seats for their support. But at the end of the day, it's a small price to pay to remain the Prime Minister, and I'm fairly certain that Trudeau will pay that in any situation. Now Scheer, the Conservatives, they changed their whole strategy and they're gunning for the majority now. That's their one aim and that's really what they need. He realized that the minority situation won't cut it because a joint force would realistically take him out of the game. He would like to avoid that by controlling the majority right from the get-go. His messaging is now catered around that. Simply winning isn't the goal. They want to have a landslide victory and they want that majority right away. If that fails, it would be very interesting to see if the bloc would support him. They have, supposedly, based on the polling data, enough seats to make a difference, and Scheer would only have to give up Quebec. To be the prime minister, it seems like not a bad price to pay either. So, these little intricacies are making politics very interesting as of late. It's an extremely fierce battle being fought by subpar candidates. It can't get much better than that, at least from the entertainment perspective. As always, I'll keep you up to date on the latest developments in this, and remember to vote. It is going to count in this election for sure. So, that's the end of my conversation for today. If you enjoyed the content, be sure to share and review. You can also find me on Twitter at Perri Platform. I'll see you soon.